Yeah, so quite a year, quite a year. And I mean, listening through that, it's quite clear. I mean, we were saying to each other while we were listening to that Ghana has survived a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been quite resilient. But how much of this, Prof, is a predictor of 2024?
Well, as you rightly said, I mean, if you want to know the future, I mean, the past is there to guide you. And I think that there are few Ghanaians who will say that 2023 hasn't been difficult. It's been an enduring year. Coming from 2022, when we made a call to the IMF, we delayed, and therefore the deterioration actually manifested explicitly in various forms. Of course, it is clear from literature that when you aid economic disruptions, you suddenly just can't bottom up or just jumpstart the economy suddenly. It's going to take a while. And the cost of correcting that economic disruptions could be very huge. And I'm looking at it from this perspective so that we are a bit moderate and mindful how we celebrate the recovery we are seeing, because it's coming at a great price. What is the price? Since 1992, just a little bit of history, we had used just one medium to correct imbalances in our economy. It has usually been fiscal consolidation. So if you check from 1996, soon after every election, or when we go through this commodity crisis and the rest of them, the headline you will see associated with our budget has been fiscal consolidation. It's a correcting measure made up of revenue enhancement, expenditure restraint. The combination you use is up to the country. Yes. So fiscal consolidation, usually we have 4 ways of judging it. The pace, it can be front loaded, the adjustment can be quick, you front load it, and that's what we are doing now.
Right.
Okay. And then we're also looking at the mix. Is it just expenditure based or revenue based or both? We are doing both, and we've been doing both over the years. And then the next level is the financing. Now, we had gone through a lot and gotten to the stage where in 2022, fiscal adjustment alone was considered to be inadequate. That tells you the extent of the deterioration, for which reason the traditional medicine we had been taking was no longer adequate. Now, what is the next level of medicine? We call that one debt restructuring. In the time past, we had embraced debt restructuring, but it was largely external. In fact, even in the 70s, the unilateral debt repudiation announced by General Champon was also a form of debt restructuring. Our total external debt at that time was just around $94.4 million or so in terms of external debt. We said we couldn't pay. All right. Then we went through HEPIC, the Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative. Now, if you put all these things together, there was no way we could restore debt sustainability by focusing on the traditional means. And therefore, we had to do domestic debt exchange. Now, and this is one of the impactful interventions we've had to impose on ourselves. So, and all of this put together with the taxes and the expenditure rationalization, represent the cost, the sacrifice we had to put on the table in order to have the recovery. Now, the interesting thing is that this adjustment cost hadn't been shared equitably. Okay, and in the past 25 years, you will see that anytime we are going through these adjustments, we offload them. Of course, we can preach burden sharing and practice burden transfer. And we've been transferring all of that to households and then the private sector. So you can see taxes, and then the debt restructuring, largely households and private sector. Now we are also restructuring the external one. So the recovery we are seeing is at a great cost.
Who do you think is going to bear the biggest brunt of this cost in 2024?
It's going to be the same households and the private sector. Ghana is not at the stage where we will actually practice private sector-led economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth. We are not there yet. We've been talking about the private sector as the engine of growth, but it doesn't feature prominently in implementation of policies and programs that actually put the interest of the private sector ahead of the public sector. And our resolve over the years is, how do we make the public sector comfortable? To do so is at the expense of households and private sector. And that public sector that is collecting so much from household and private sector, if that public sector had been efficient in the delivery of public services, the net benefit will be positive. So in some European countries, they pay higher taxes.
Yeah.
But there's quality public service delivery. And therefore, even if you are paying more taxes, you are seeing the roads. If you are paying all kinds of levies, you are seeing the infrastructure. You are seeing how efficient the government is. But we don't have that here. We have a public sector that is largely corrupt and inefficient. And you don't need a prophet to tell you that an inefficient public sector represent cost to the private sector as it interacts with the public sector. You need an efficient, cost-efficient, lean approach that enables the private sector to have breathing space. Because if the public sector is corrupt, who is paying? It's the private sector. And all of that contributes to the high productive cost base of doing business. There is no way, if we continue like this, we will be able to ensure economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth. No, we will be unique to expect that outcome by doing the kind of things that we've been doing. So yeah, it's been quite, and we are not out of it. I mean, and let me put it that so that every Ghanaian, we have to be moderate with our expectations in terms of how growth is going to turn out and how it's going to benefit Ghanaian. I mean, you can have growth at different level. The economy can recover at different level, right? But before it will benefit the ordinary Ghanaian, we are looking at maintaining macroeconomic stability for not less than 15 years. We say in economics, low inflation is desirable in itself, but you need to maintain low for long. Right, we need to have low inflation of, let's say, about 6%, between 6% and 8% for not less than 15 years. Okay, then you begin to see how the macro level development begin to trickle down, begin to manifest at the micro level, at the household level. What we have seen over the years is some level of progress. Inflation comes down, then within the shortest possible time, it jumps up. That wide swings is not good for planning, it's not good for wealth preservation and the rest of them. So yes, we are seeing some recovery, but it's not the kind of recovery that we will say we have arrived. So if you see the macro numbers, all of them are not telling the same story. They are all not pointing in the same direction. So if you see it that way, you will be unique to conclude that you have turned the corner.
There's a point you made about inflation. And of course, somewhere 2022, we're doing 54%. That was massive.
End of 2022, 54.1%.
End of November, we did like 26%, which was almost half what we had in 2022. The projection this year is to do 15%.
Yeah, it's still very high.
That's the point I'm coming to. Do you think, I mean, because to government, that's what's celebrating, and that's a massive improvement. But would it translate into, let's say, lower prices for me, who will be going to the market to buy the basic things, ensuring that I enjoy a better life than in 2023?
No. There are several factors that could cause inflation to come down, subdue demand, and the rest of them. But in the first place, we are starting off from a higher base. Don't forget, if inflation is coming down, it doesn't necessarily mean that prices are coming down.
That's true.
No, it doesn't necessarily mean. And the point also is that the reason we could not conclude totally that we have turned the corner is that even that inflation, the marginality is very wide. If you take food inflation, we can say the average is 34%. But food inflation in the eastern region is more than 50%.
That's true.
In the northern region, is more than 50%. Again, that same food inflation varies from region to region. So it's the average we are using. But within that same economy, you see variation. So somebody in the eastern region could not be saying I've turned the corner because food inflation is more than 53%. Okay, just a couple of months ago, food inflation in Northeast was more than 75% in that same economy and the rest of them. Again, inflation varies from region to region, district to district. Even as we are all sitting here, we carry different inflation rate.
That's true.
Because your inflation is a reflection of your consumption basket. And we don't have the same consumption basket.
That's right.
Okay, so it varies. So we need to recognize that. If you see that variation, what it tells is that beyond general policies, you need targeted policies with a certain intention to drive some outcome beyond just general policy prescription. It's intention, which is important. Okay. Then again, if you look at inflation has come down, the policy rate is still at 30%. That was where we pegged it at the height of the crisis. The central bank is uncomfortable to take its legs off the accelerator. It tells you that risk hasn't moderated significantly. So policy rate is still there. Check the Ghana reference rate, whether it's trending downwards. It's 32.16%. So you ask yourself,
it should be awkward, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. That all reasonable expectation.
Yeah, we are the situation where a single textbook cannot explain our problems. So you need to look at it from different angles and see whether all the macro variables are in the same direction and the rest of them. Of course, we do not expect that it will get worse, but who are we to expect that it will get worse for all the price that we have paid? Okay, people have lost their haircuts. Okay, it's one of the most expensive things. We didn't even ask the creditors to choose the style of the haircut. The state selected the hairstyle for them.
Santu.
Yeah. We did all of that. Okay, so we've paid the price in order to have this recovery. So what we are seeing should not be unexpected.
Prof, we're coming back to you for more in a moment, but I want to bring in Ben Boakye so that we can also start to see the image of the energy sector, the power sector, as we go into 2024. And Ben, just before you come in, we also have a bit of a wrap up of some of the I don't think we can call them highlights of the energy sector happening in 2023. Let's just call them events. Here it is.
We said, let's do something that the textbooks don't teach you. Let's do something that is out of the box. And this is why we said gold for oil. Thankfully, Ghana took its first delivery of oil under the Gold for Oil program.
I told the chairman, our main focus should be that, can we pay for the gas we procure? Simple. With this price, if you procure the gas from the IOCs, which is the international oil companies, can we pay them? If there's a deficit, how do you deal with that? And if we have done that, our job is finished. Because you purchase the raw gas. The gas comes in raw form. It comes with certain elements that you need to process at Atuabo. So the IOCs, which is the Jubilee and those things, theirs is the one the gas leaves the flange. They are done.
I can assure you that it will be resolved. I do not think that we're going to go back into the situation that we plunge into permanent darkness and for years. I think they will resolve it as quickly as possible. Because this is the policy direction of the government, that it will be inimical to the economy and the arrangements we find ourselves in to plunge the nation back to do so. So any technical solution will come speedily. That's the thinking of the government.
I would rather ECG is not operated the way it is operated now.
What do you mean by that?
There must be an element of privatization in ECG. There must be that hopefully will increase the level of two things: level of infusion, cash infusion into ECG. That will also change some of its practices.
I read with shock yesterday that the Electricity Company of Ghana had donated 200 motorbikes to Ghana Police Service. ECG has no business taking over the responsibility of the state to provide logistics for Ghana Police. ECG is in debt to the tune of billions of cedis. Indeed, 2 weeks ago, the Minister for Finance had to intervene to stop Seno Asogwe shutting down because of ECG's indebtedness to IPPs. For an entity that cannot pay its debtors, they have no business donating motorbikes to Ghana Police.
Even the state-owned companies who sell to other state-owned companies or elsewhere don't also get paid. Mm-hmm. So it can't be that, unless you are saying that they are also doing take and pay contracts. They are not doing take and pay contracts. So VRA, why is VRA not able to piling up receivables? Why is Bui Power piling up receivables? Bui Power claims that from around 2018, they had $300 million in receivables, which means that was money UCG should have paid them. They say it's now getting to $700 million. Is that take or pay? Where is that $400 million?
All right. Well, it looks like we kind of, muddled our way through 2023 by juju and tricks. At the end of the year, we started to see power cuts in some places, which the government continues to deny that it was load shedding. But now here we are. 2024 is upon us. Election year. We know that politically nobody wants the lights off. But what's the reality on the ground? What can we expect in the power sector in 2024, Ben?
Thanks, Kojo. I think 2024, we survived. We survived doing the same things. We survived piling up debts and trying to resolve them as the bills come. So you may be right to project that we will try to survive in 2024. And for some of us who keep analyzing the data and the numbers, we only worry about at what cost, that survival actually happens. If you look at the budget for 2023, our projection was that we're going to, at business as usual, support the energy sector with about 2.3 billion Ghana cedis. That is if we did nothing. If we're able to remodel our ways and change the trajectory, we could save that money for development. The bad news is that by end of year, if we reconcile the data, we would have spent much more than was projected. Interestingly, in the budget, the finance minister said we did 4 billion, less than the 12 billion projected for the 3 quarters. But the reality is that if you owe and you haven't paid, it's not an achievement. You piled up the debt, you racked it up, it's still there, and a commitment for the state to pick up. So that is really the troubling part of an energy sector that is supposed to be business, power sold, revenue recovered, and everybody paid along the chain. But that's not what is happening. So you have the budget now and then being called upon to rescue the power sector. So everything else comes to a halt for the needs of IPPs and generators, transmitters, and distributors of power to be met before anything else. So that is a scenario that, you look at all things possible, we would have to go through for 2024 as well. I've seen letters and exchanges that happens during the Yuletide, where the sector, agencies and private companies had to, share out their actions to allow us to have the lights on. For example, WAPCO wrote to GNPC, giving them the room to allow gas to flow, even though they were indebted close to $20 million, which ordinarily would have caused a cessation of gas flow to the power plants. But they extended their action, to this month, January. If we don't pay, they may want to curtail gas supply to us. We've also seen some actions from the IPPs. Asogli in December was wild, trying to get their money back. They managed to get $60 million from government. We don't know how they're going to push back on these delays in payments. And I keep saying that Asogli was one of the, considerate IPPs in the space. Suddenly, they are chasing their money. And I suspect that in 2024, given that it's an election year, all the IPPs are going to be looking for their money, because you don't want to push your debt to 2025 when there's a new government, a new negotiation, and the rest of it. So those are the threats we face. The budget says now that the under recoveries could be as high as 27 billion. In the medium-term trend for 2023, we were expecting that as business as usual, the payments will be around 22 billion. So now we're seeing about 5 billion adjustment, which tells you that we still don't have a handle on what to do to actually solve the energy sector problems. Already, we are indebted close to $400 million for gas supplies to ENI. We have letters of credit with Stanchart. So that has become sort of a soft spot, a soft landing for borrowing to pay for gas that is consumed in the power sector, because interest rate is considerably low on those LCs. So what ENI does is that when we pile up the debt, they just go to the bank and draw down on the LCs, and government classify it as a loan to be paid in a year. So that cycle has continued, and I suspect that will continue, because there is no clear direction on how we resolve the energy sector problem. And if you listen to the videos I had Bright and others talk about, some of the challenges in the energy sector, we keep piling up the waste. I mean, last year we fought so hard to stop some of the waste that we saw were being orchestrated and hung on the people of Ghana. For example, the gas pipeline that was being constructed to Kumasi, which we thought was premature, given the fact that we are so much in debt. And the worst you do in such a situation was to accumulate more debt. Over 2 billion has already been committed. Nobody listened to us. Parliament pretended to be investigating. A shady report was issued by our Thatcher's committee, rubber stamping the transaction. Now the pipeline is completed. There is no utilization. We have to start paying for it. All right. So that debt is also going to crystallize in 2022. We've been fighting some of the power sector decisions, IPPs being extended. AXA power plant we thought was a complete waste. They've been extended. They are underutilized. We are paying them. We fully paid for Ameri power plant over $510 million. It was an opportunity for us to use that power plant rather than extending any other contract. We packed it in the name of moving it to Kumasi and then extending other IPPs, and that plant is wasting away. And if you check with engineers of VRA and you check the status of that plant, we will still need to pump in a lot of money to bring it back to work. So these are some of the lousy decisions that are going on in the power sector that makes our situation much more precarious for 2024. But the reality is that we're going to rack up more debt. We're going to have to sacrifice the budget as IPPs cough. And my worry essentially is that the state-owned enterprises and entities in the space are going to really, really struggle. And the implication, if we are not careful, could be much more dire. Because you have the likes of Gridco, who depend solely on revenues from ECG, and they are not getting paid. If they don't get paid to maintain the grid infrastructure and the grid goes off, everybody loses power. And if they lose power, The sad part is that we're still going to pay for that power because the IPPs are committed on a long-term take-or-pay basis. So we have to pay them whether you need them or not. The VRA is not going to get money. They will make money from their own sale of power to other businesses, but ECG will continue to underpay them because the IPPs will be needing the money. The IPP payments are over 70% in arrears, month-on-month basis. So that is also going to continue to pile up. But to sum it all up, Kojo, if you look at how we're behaving and how we're treating the energy sector, the reality is that you put our gold revenues together, you put our oil revenues together, and it's not enough to offset the mismanagement of the energy sector.
The issue on the minds of many, of course, we started a certain energy sector reform program on the back of the IMF program. Many people are worried about one thing. We are paying quarterly increases in electricity bills. Is that going to continue in 2024? Should I budget to pay more for electricity? And whether or not that will be justified? Yes, Ben.
Well, business as usual, you should expect some adjustment. If we are not willing to fix the inefficiencies, recover revenues from power sold, then the few faithfuls are going to have to pay for it. And that's been the trend. So we waste the energy, people steal the power, and if you are faithful enough to keep paying, then we always come to you to pay more. And that has proven not to be the solution. Just increasing the tariff, and the data shows the more you increase the tariff, the more irresponsible people get. Because if they cannot pay, they are much more enticed to steal the power.
But
and especially
our policy is to do full cost recovery.
Under the IMF program, yes.
Yes.
But it has failed, and the budget even recognizes that we've not been able to deliver on that. And given that it's even an election year where the political appetite is going to crash with the demands of the IMF to actually do cost recovery, it's not going to happen. But again, if you're talking about cost recovery, you have to break it down to see whether the average person is paying enough. If you're only collecting about 30% of the revenues that you're supposed to take from everybody, then the work is not really on adjustment. The work is on making sure that you can identify who is consuming power and go collect your money. And that is where the failure really is. So if you keep piling it on the few responsible citizens and consumers, you cannot be classifying that as cost recovery. You're only being lazy in delivering value and collecting revenue for power sold, and just thinking that you can keep adjusting the tariff. You look at the inefficiencies way back, when we started thinking about bringing in the private sector, it was around 23%. The benchmark was around 23%. We were supposed to reduce that in 5 years to about 18% of the commercial and technical losses. Today, it's over 30%, and that has been absorbed as a benchmark by the PURC. So I don't know where we go from there. If we don't fix the inefficiencies, we will never get to that point where we can say that this is the cost recovery, when we are only racking up the tariff on the few faithful ones.
Right. Well, if you just joined us, Professor Bokpin and Ben Boakye are helping us look into the crystal ball to see how 2024 will go in terms of the economy and energy. We're going to take a break, okay? But when we come back, look, they say we have turned a corner. But let's be real, okay? We're seeing more taxes. Inflation is still, phenomenally high compared to our neighbors. Our currency is still vulnerable. Interest rates are still up in the stratosphere and not coming down. We've already seen businesses closing up shop and running away from our shores just because they don't find it profitable to operate here anymore. So they say we have turned the corner, but will this year actually be easier economically than last year? Also, you know that usually in an election year, politics will step in to pump money into the energy sector and keep the lights on regardless. But will this be feasible? We've already asked the question about the influence of the IMF on this, political ability to keep the lights on. Will it be feasible? Also, let's not forget IMF wants higher tariffs. Can Ghanaians actually afford regular increases in tariffs in 2024? And is there any circumstance under which Owusu Bempah's prophecy can actually come to pass in 2024? Can something cause Dunkra in 2024? All right. Well, the good book says, "Lean not on your own understanding." So we will lean on Professor Bokpin and Ben Boakye's understanding.
All your ways, acknowledge him.
That's right.
And you will direct your path, not Professor Bokpin.
Well, we'll see what we can do with that when we come back from these messages. All right, welcome back. It's the Super Morning Show, and this is the Crystal Ball Edition Part 1. We're looking into how 2024 is going to pan out in terms of our economy and our energy sector. We've got more to come in subsequent days. We'll be looking at our health sector, our education sector, and so forth. But we're starting off with the big ones, the economy and, of course, energy. Our guest, Professor Godfred Bokpin, Professor of Finance and an economist at the University of Ghana. Ben Boakye, of course, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP. And already we've learned so much. If you've just joined us, you've missed a little bit. But don't worry, you can catch up in good time. By the way, keep your text messages coming. We're seeing all of your views and opinions as you share them. Text messages on Super Morning Show are brought to you by GCB Bank PLC. GCB Personal Loan. Make that big move and dream a reality. Now, you have to make that big move with GCB's personal loan. GCB, your biggest and largest bank in Ghana, is offering GCB salaried account holders personal loans in less than 24 hours to fund your next big move. Now, with GCB's Big Move personal loan promo, you can access up to a whopping 400,000 Ghana cedis at a significantly reduced interest rate with a 2-month repayment grace period to meet your urgent financial obligations with a smile. It's time to make that big move, and whether it's educational fee payment, buying a car, or building your dream home, GCB makes these dreams a reality and makes life easier for you, their customer. So let GCB lend you the needed support to make that big move to take care of those urgent personal needs. Visit any GCB branch or call 0800 422 422 for further inquiries. Terms and conditions apply. GCB, your bank for life. Now listen, in 2024, don't let any month pass you by without giving yourself a treat, because it's going to be hard. All right, now here's an idea of a treat that you can afford, but which you will remember and which will be better every time you go back. Safari Valley Eco Park. Okay, they've got the Safari Wildlife Experience, which creates an environment that fosters the harmonious cohabitation of forest, water, humans, and wildlife. I'm talking zebra, sable antelope, llama, wallaby, fallow deer, Patagonian mara, and so many others. Prof. Bokpin, your colleague, Professor Peter Kote, is a witness of how wonderful Safari Valley Eco Park is, and he's enjoyed it economically at a starting price of 250 Ghana cedis, and it's also free for children up to 6 years. This place is only an hour outside Accra, and they are open from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. each day. Go visit Safari Valley Eco Park with your friends and family today for the thrill of a lifetime. If you want to know more, go to safarivalleyresort.com. Check out Safari Valley on Instagram, or just call 059 691 4394. Okay, it's another festive season, and MTN is throwing a Christmas party just for you. It's the Just For You surprise offer tailored to your special taste. You can now enjoy discounted surprise offers this festive season when you use my MTN app, or when you dial *141# or *170#. Yeah, you're getting the most juicy data offers of between 1 gig and as much as 20 gig to browse and hit social media with all the Christmas photos and New Year videos. Remember, this offer lasts from now and it continues for some time. Check out your special offer today. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, let's get back to it. Our guests are Ben Boakye and Professor Godfred Bokpin. We're trying to see how 2024 is going to pan out in terms of the economy and the power sector. Interesting details we've already picked up. First of all, Prof. Bokpin has made it quite clear that the burden of our recovery is being borne heavier by us, the private individuals and the business sector, than by the public sector. We've also learned from Ben Boakye that, look, our gold and oil revenues put together are not enough to offset the energy sector debt. And that debt is just going to keep growing because, of course, we're going to use more energy in 2024. Let's see what else we can learn. Prof, they keep telling us that we've turned the corner. But I think the factors are quite clear. We still have a very vulnerable currency. We still have an interest rate that is higher than our neighbors or any other country that I can think of in the sub-region at the moment. We are struggling under the weight of our debts. So really, they say we've turned the corner. But is 2024 going to be an easier year than 2023?
Okay, thank you. Typically, if we had turned the corner, then 2024, we should look forward to it with celebration. Right, because then there will be no corner to turn again. Right. But of course, I do recognize that we've made some progress. The worst moments are over. And therefore, we've seen some recovery, some relative stability. I think that is good news. That is a good starting point to look into 2024. If you look at real economic activity, the first 3 quarters, it's still been contracting from the Bank of Ghana's data. Of course, the rate of contraction is slowing, but it's still negative. We've seen some pickup in some areas, including job advert in the 3rd quarter.
Oh yeah.
Not that significant though, but because if you look at that relative to the entry into the labor market, you will see that there's a huge gap in terms of unemployment. As we speak, 1.45 million Ghanaians are successfully unemployed. Right? We are talking about over 6 million Ghanaians that are multidimensionally poor. Majority of them are food insecure. In fact, unemployment is high among females compared to males, and it's more urban. Okay. So we are getting more of our females accessing tertiary education and entering the labor market, but we are not creating decent jobs, especially in the formal wage economy, to absorb them. This requires policy interventions. We just can't leave that to chance, right? Then again, so that is job adverts. Of course, if you see electricity consumption, it's picked up, but of course, cement sale is going down. That already tells you that all is not well in all the aspect of the economy, especially with construction. Unless the evidence is that people are now building without cement and iron rods. I don't think so.
Which I doubt.
Yeah. So again, you can see that construction sector is not, but you need that sector. In fact, it's one of the labor-intensive subsectors of our economy. Yeah. That if activity is picking up, there you expect that it would impact a lot of Ghana. In fact, a lot of the people you see on the streets, if the construction subsector had been doing well, you would have found a lot of them there. You would have seen the value chain. You would have seen the ladies also cooking for them whilst others are lifting mortar. Because not everybody who can sit in an air condition. Some people are meant to lift mortars. Somebody can lift you and your wife together, right? That is how they've built themselves for that. So we need to create avenues for all of them to find something to do and earn a living. Then again, if you look at port activity, we've seen the slowdown. Yes. Okay, we've seen the slowdown. In fact, the 3 conservative quarters, we've seen the slowdown, right? Again, that doesn't tell a unified story that we've turned the corner. Of course, we do not expect deterioration, so that is not something that we want to consider. So on the back of all of this, and looking into 2024, government has put its best foot forward. You can see that in the 2024 budget. Non-oil growth, we are looking at 2.1%. That's very small. For a population that we are talking about. The kind of growth that will benefit Ghanaians, ordinary Ghanaians. It's
and
not,
create jobs.
And create jobs.
Yeah.
It's not 2.1%. And if you look at the growth drivers, they are not really going to come from the labor-intensive subsectors of the economy where we can create decent jobs, especially in the formal wage economy. Look, could you look at it this way? Between 2013 and 2021, nearly 20% of our GDP growth came from mining and the rest of them. And if you look at that, within that period also, job creation in those sectors have actually gone down. Okay, so we have celebrated, we have honored jobless growth. Okay, so, and those days are over, right? So the narrative we want to push is that we are looking at growth beyond GDP, right? Because, in fact, the advanced countries, the Scandinavian and the others, are looking beyond GDP growth. Okay, so we are looking at job-rich growth. We are looking at inclusive growth. Okay, so, and the recovery we are talking about right now is not job rich. Once it's not job rich, then it means that the redistribution of that growth is going to be limited. And that is why we
as in filling it in your pocket will be difficult.
Yeah.
As in people getting jobs as a result of what the picture is painted from the macroeconomic indicators.
Yeah.
It might not be the same. So that mismatch will be there, which may send a signal to people that no, it's not real.
Yeah,
it's
so if
not
people say that the economy is doing well, no. In fact, we have seen growth that has left so many Ghanaians behind. In fact, a good way to put it is we are just pounding enough fufu for others to go and eat. And you can see it also reflecting in our balance of payment data. Trade balance is positive. Theoretically, it should contribute to the strengthening of the local currency, right? Because you are earning more than you actually need to meet your import demands. But the cedi is still depreciating. The problem is not the theory. You have to look at assumptions and aligning the theory. Then you have to look at the other component of the balance of payment. Then when it comes to services and income account, you see where the betrayal is. And that is a reflection of the low local content in our economy, right? So you have these big companies, their exports are recorded in our books, but actually they don't repatriate all the earnings here. Okay, which would actually aid or offer cushion to the cedi. That is not happening. So, and if you look at the export drive, the institutional units that are driving that, I mean, less than 10% of them are Ghanaian owned. Okay, so you can't really say that this economy is yours. You understand? Then the other bit to keep in mind is that, you know, the way we've designed our tax system is also not appropriate, right? So if you say tax to GDP ratio is low, it's simply because, Kojo, over the years, we have not been growing a taxable economy. Okay, so how do you grow a taxable economy? Okay, so because it's not every aspect of GDP and its redistribution that is taxable. We have to be intentional about growing taxable economy and aiding the redistribution of wealth. But we are not doing that. So we've seen positive growth, but that growth is benefiting a tiny few. Okay, whilst the majority are spectators and the rest of them. That is not good, and it's not safe for anyone. Now see what the growth, that kind of jobless growth has done. We've seen inequality widening, right? And that is not safe, even for the rich. It's always difficult protecting the privileged few in the midst of unsafe majority, right?
So a quote the president was actually quoting most of the time in the 2012, 2008, ahead
when he
of
was in opposition.
Yes. Okay. So there's work for us to do. We recognize that we've made some progress, but it would have been more meaningful if we would be moderate in celebrating our success. And this is why I'm saying so. We are still in the midst of negotiating with our creditors. So if you are having a cocktail celebration of turning the corner, give creditors money to them.
Thank you.
Okay, you are sitting on the coupons of creditors, over $2 billion. You are having a cocktail. You don't know how they are going to have their Christmas. So let's our actions tell the same story at the negotiation table. We are likely to be received favorably by our creditors and the rest of them. Remember that, and maybe one day we can have that conversation. You look at the G20 common framework backed by the IMF, and you see that there's a problem in there. And that is why we are having these challenges with when are we going to agree with our external and the rest of them. Because you look at the DSA and the burden on creditors to bail out Ghana is so huge. It's so huge.
Prof, you said something earlier. You talked about how the burden of our recovery is heavier on the private sector, the individual, the business, than it is on the public sector.
Because government is not sacrificing.
Indeed. And this is an analogy that I've used to explain this. My question comes from it. So I give the example of a father who is supposed to look after the family. But whatever money comes into the family, the father is spending most of it on himself instead of on the wife and children. Now, spending it on himself too, he's not using it to maybe buy healthy food so that he'll be strong to protect the family. He's using it to buy fatty foods that are making him less of a capable protector to the family. So the money is going to him, and the output of it is to nobody's benefit. Now, with that in mind, the solution is either to force father to spend the money on good things so that everybody benefits, indirectly, or force him to give the money to mother and children directly. So in our setting, how do we either force government to ensure rather instead of spending all the money on government using it to do this, government using it to do that, to rather create the enabling environment for private sector to thrive? How do we either make them do that, or if they insist on using the money themselves, how do we force them to actually account for the money that they spend in 2024?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Great. So we have a role to play. We elected them. We actually don't write an appointment letter for them. They decide how they have to be paid. Of course, committee here and the rest of them. But I think that it's increasingly becoming clearer to even the politicians that our governance is becoming unbearable. That there's an urgent need to save Ghana's democracy from itself. That is different from proposing an alternative. Right? How do we make democracy work for the ordinary Ghanaian? How do we ensure that the democratic dividend trickles down? But you see, we just can't wait. Ghanaians should understand that you merely just can't go and vote once in 4 years during the AGM and sit back and expect that the democratic dividend will trickle down. It will not, because it has not, and there's no evidence that it's going to going forward. So we all have to be active in demanding accountability. To do so, we have to learn to bury our political differences, tribal, whatever, and then we have to learn to pursue the common good. The kind of change we want must begin with self also, as individuals, and then also perhaps all of us coming on board. But we cannot look to those who are extremely vulnerable on the streets, because the way they will cause reforms, we cannot bear it. So what Ghana needs right now is the middle class. The missing middle has been a problem in our democracy. Okay. And the missing middle, we were supposed to interface between the very vulnerable and then the
ruling class.
Okay. But we have been very quiet. But now, it's not so. We had behaved like a tortoise. Now our back is being, there is heat now. Because we have gotten, every Ghanaian should know, especially in the middle class, that the country has gotten to the stage where the abuse of tax revenue is no longer enough. That is why now they are after our investment and savings in bonds and the rest of them. It's no longer safe. So to think that, I earn my salary, I put up my house, you fence it, and these days people are buying gates in front of their house, which is even stronger than the gate in front of hell, right? Just to protect themselves. Look at the cost. Look at the cost Ghanaians are incurring to ensure personal security. Okay, and yet we are still not safe. And the rest of it. So I think that every Ghanaian, especially in the middle class, less, I don't know what we will lose if we see that something is black and we say it is black. What would we lose? Why can't we just speak the truth? I don't know. I mean, and sometimes people feel like, oh, if you try to be professional about it, then it means that you are consistent or something. But remember that when we talk about these macro numbers, if you lift the veil, it's human life. It's human life. We are talking about life and the rest of them. So you go to the embassies right now. You see Ghanaians at the embassies during the day. In the night, they are at the airport. They are leaving. Okay, they are leaving. Okay, we have used our limited resources to train people, and we needed their services here to build our economy. They are leaving. Okay, if you look at the medical sector alone, the average cost of training a medical doctor is more than $60,000.
Yeah.
From beginning to the end. And when they are ready to serve the country, no, we should be sad as a country to see that professionals are living like this. And you see, the people perhaps that you would expect them to leave should be those on the street who are worrying us. They will never get visa. They are smart, right?
Yes.
So they are giving the visa to the health professionals. These are ready made.
That they didn't train.
They didn't spend $1 sterling or whatever to train them. But they can have them. Why wouldn't they give them visa? They are going to Canada, they are going to UK, and the rest of them. Those who are staying, maybe God has sent them a WhatsApp that they should stay.
I want to bring in Ben. I want to bring in Ben at this point. And the big question before we took the break was, look, is there something that can actually happen that would make the prophecy of Owusu Bempah that this year there will be Dumkra? Is there some circumstance under which that could happen, Ben?
I'm hearing this prophecy for the first time.
Okay. Yes, we've been regaled with it over the past 2 days.
Maybe we should stop looking at the data and put on our sackcloth and ashes, because that's the only way in the Christian realm you can deal with prophecies of that nature. But let's go back to Ghana for a second. Yes, so I think we really need to pay attention to the critical things that ought to be done. Particularly, I'm worried about the state agencies that are providing significant power and also managing the backbone of the power sector. I mean, I'm talking about VRA and GRIDCO. GRIDCO in particular is in a very dire state. I understand recent times they've even been borrowing to pay salaries because they're not getting money from the power sector, because we prioritize IPPs and not the state agencies. But if GRIDCO's system collapses, then that prophecy becomes a reality. All right, so we need to really pay attention on that. VRA is also extremely critical. The hydro infrastructure has to be maintained. They need revenues to be able to do that. But we need to really look beyond 2024, because 2025, 2026, 2027, whatever, depends on what we do in 2024. All right, and therefore, having that leadership to think through the problems and try to resolve them. We are already 10 years behind schedule on what we needed to do to really address the power sector challenges. 2014, a definite decision was made by the country to bring in the private sector to manage the distribution arm of the sector, so that we would have this recurrent under recoveries taken off the books of government. The politicians have failed to deliver on that. And much of this is really the self-dealings and the need to account for the political interest before the national interest. That is what has brought us where we are. And 2024, we are paying such significant amounts for under recoveries. We need to find ways to deviate from that so that we can build a sustainable economy. Otherwise, 2025, 2026, we will have a bigger problem on our hands in the energy sector to deal with. We'll be dealing with debt accumulation. We'll also be dealing with recurrent debt. And as I indicated already, your resource revenue is not able to catch up with the recurrent or the accumulation of the debt. All right. So how do you even deal with the outstanding debt and the piled up? So we need to have that leadership and bold decisions to fix the energy sector in 2024. But again, it's going to be difficult because it's an election year, and that is why it's required that the sacrifices are made. And Prof, to disappoint you, you will still need to tighten your belt and speak the truth. and not worry about somebody wanting the reverse from you. And that is what we have to commit ourselves to doing. Monitoring the space on a daily basis to see the decisions that are being made and to ensure that they are in the best interest of the country and how it survives beyond elections.
So before the break we were talking about whether or not the IMF will have any kind of influence on how disciplined we are in the financing of that energy sector debt. Now you feel that already the IMF has lost its grip on our discipline there, because they wanted us to actually pay realistic tariffs. But what they did say was that the tariffs should increase on the scheduled dates. Will that not still happen? Will we not still see the quarterly increases on schedule?
I think the IMF's interests are pretty much macro, right? So they are more interested in how you balance your books, right? So in the energy sector, they want you to stay current. And what that means is that you want to be able to pay the recurrent debt. As IPPs generate power, you have to be able to pay them. As the transmitter transmits power, you have to be able to pay them and not rely on the budget to do that. However, if the budget wants to do that, at the macro level, the IMF is interested in you ensuring that your total expenditure matches some allowable revenue stream, right? So that you're not piling more debt. So if you are a government and you are willing to say, I'm not even going to pay school fees, all that I'm going to use my money to do is to pay for the energy sector debt, IMF can give you room to do that. There's a program to ensure that you are able to improve the energy sector, which they are doing, but it's not working. But IMF is not going to be too bothered once the macro shows that you are able to balance your books to a reasonable extent. You can forget about agri sector, you can forget about your social interventions and be able to pay for your debt. And that's why they force government to put the under recoveries in the budget, so that you are showing on the expenditure side what you're going to do to be able to address the energy sector problem. They are interested in ensuring that we are staying current, but if you don't want to do it, they're not going to put a knife to your throat to do that. They want to make sure that the overall picture looks like you are turning the corner, and that is what the IMF will be interested in.
I'm sure you have hinted at this in different forms. You mentioned boldly that the biggest problem in the sector is mismanagement. Is it that we have incompetent people, or we have competent people who are just corrupt, or they are just not able to manage the system because the system itself is broken?
I think the system is not short of competent people. I don't believe that managing the power sector is beyond anybody in that space. I reduce everything to corruption and political dealings. You may be contested by saying it's corruption and they will ask you for the data. But when you have a power sector that hardly does open and competitive tender, the only motivation from any theoretical perspective will be self-dealing and interest, because they are interested in those high paying contracts where the billions are paid, and that is where they want to deal with people directly and make money. And that is how it happens. And that's why you don't see open competitive bidding in that space, either for procurement of service or procurement of power plants. And there is replete data to show that when you have a system like that, it's just self-dealing and corruption. And that is what has bedeviled us, and we can't have a handle on the inefficiencies in the sector. So what ordinarily will cost you $2, somebody go bring it $5 and we have to pay for it. All right, and we keep talking about it, we keep murmuring over it, and nobody cares, because it is not an individual's pocket, it is our collective pocket that goes to address some of these inefficiencies.
We have been told Matthew Bokpin is the magic wand who is keeping our lights on. You are the expert in the sector. Is this anywhere near the truth?
I usually don't want to personalize the issue. It's a government issue, right? And these are issues that on a daily basis are before the cabinet, they are before the economic management team, they are before the finance ministry. And in fact, some significant decisions of the energy sector are taken by the finance ministry, because they are the ones that ultimately pay.
So
it's a government issue. Of course, he's the sector minister, and the buck stops with him also to ensure that the sector is run efficiently. But what I've seen in the space is that we only realize that there's a problem when the invoice is on the table, right? When the IPP brings their invoice, and then everybody is running around. But on a daily basis, the decisions that we are taking are terrible, and we can't run away from it. Either procurement or negotiations or whatever it is, they are terrible. I mean, you are calling the IPPs to come to the table for a haircut, and you are not telling them how you are addressing the future. How does the future look for them? Are you going to call them every month to come and sit for a haircut? They're not going to do that. They have a chamber that wanted to engage to ensure that collectively they can agree on what that future looks like. Government says, I want to deal with them individually because they have, individual agreements with the government. But that's hypocritical, because when you want debt renegotiation and you wanted to give us haircuts, you didn't call all of us individually into the barber shop. You just sat in your office and gave us a collective haircut. And so you have a group that you are so indebted to that you could also quickly negotiate a roadmap. Let all of them be part of the solution on how we address the inefficiencies. You said, no, I want to do an individual negotiation with the various IPPs, and it's not working. And the budget itself says, the under recovery is as a result of delays of negotiations. These negotiations and delays, we've been hearing them since 2018.
Yeah.
All right. What is it that we can't do? Is it that we don't have capable people at the table to negotiate, or we don't know that some things are just impossible to negotiate and we have to move on as a country with the alternative, or we don't even have a plan B beyond negotiations? So these are real issues that we need to address, going forward. And it's always as if it's become usual. Once you can put it on paper, we are negotiating, it's enough, and then you can go to sleep. Once you can tell the people that we are paying the bills, it's enough. You can go to sleep. And that has really been the problem that we have on our hands. But we need to have clear-cut solutions, honest data that we can interpret to find a solution for it. I mean, now ERC is publishing how much the cash waterfall mechanism is paying to the IPPs.
Yeah.
And you look at that report, and they are not telling you how much the debt actually looks like. So they are still hiding the data. They don't want to tell you how much debt accumulated in the month, for which the collection was able to pay a certain amount. They are not telling you. But the reality is that we are doing about 30%. So the 70% that government has to pay, nobody's telling you how that number looks like. All right? And we are happily hiding the data, only to be thrown at us at some odd moment, and then we don't know what to do with it. All right? So these are critical things that we need to keep pushing for that clarity, transparency, and commitment to nation building, ultimately, because that's the power sector we're talking about here. We can't run this economy without power.
Yeah, I've got to say, Ben and Prof, I've been getting text messages from business owners, from captains of industry, who are doing what we ask them to do, making notes and saying a big thank you to the two of you for really giving them as clear as possible a glance, a glimpse into the crystal ball, so that they can make concrete decisions, based on the intel and analysis that you have shared this morning. So I mean, we are eternally grateful to the two of you for the time you've spent with us this morning. We really appreciate it. Ben Boakye, of course, is the Executive Director of ACEP, the Africa Center for Energy Policy. And Professor Godfred Bokpin needs no introduction, a professor of finance and an economist at the University of Ghana. God bless you both for your time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me on your show this morning.
It's always a pleasure.
Good morning, Ben.
All right, listen, there's more to come on the Super Morning Show. Don't go anywhere. We're back after these.